You are watching Omnis Protocol, and I am back with another Star Wars Shatterpoint battle report with commentary. This is the Evergreen GT finals game between brothers Kenny and Scott from the Utah community. End up featuring themselves in the finals, so a little bit of a LVO rematch as these guys played in the finals for LVO as well. Two extremely talented players, very skilled. They put in a lot of time, so very lucky to have them on camera again so we can see them play a different list. So in this particular case, Kenny is the bottom of the screen. He brought Kanan and Cassian with the secondaries, Callus and Ezra with Rebel Commandos and Baze and Chirrut. So very, very, very strong team there. I think no one would be surprised. And then Scott brought the Bounty Hunter version. So it's Cassian and Cad Bane, and then it has IG-88 to be able to add additional dice. It has Boba Fett, and then it also has Rebel Commandos and Baze and Chirrut. So about half of their squads are the same, but very interesting matchup. And I will share, as they were kind of like getting ready for this game, one of the things they were talking about, because one of them had Never Tell Me the Odds, that if either of them took their off list, which was Anakin Skywalker and Ki-Adi-Mundi, they were worried if one side chose the Cassian list and one side chose the Republic list and then won priority and was able to select Never Tell Me the Odds to kind of force the other person to play the Skycam list, the Skywalker Ki-Adi-Mundi list on Never Tell Me the Odds, that they could be disadvantaged. Well, whether or not that is as true as they felt it was in the moment may be up for some debate, but they definitely felt it was true, and they know these lists extremely well. So that led both of them to deciding to play their Cassian lists because it was definitely teched more for Never Tell Me the Odds. So I think we're going to get into it, and I will just say one last time, I really appreciate both of these guys so much. Having them come out to, travel to a Washington GT was wonderful to have them. They were fantastic opponents for everybody, and now we get them featured in a finals game, and so I'm excited to dig into this. All right, so we do look like we have Never Tell Me the Odds as the mission. Two great sportsmen shaking hands before the game. Always like to see that. Looks like Scott won priority, and he's pulling Rebel Commandos first. They're just making sure they've got all of the objectives flip over correctly. We did change up tables a little bit. I switched to my kind of Hoth-themed table a bit. It's still all official terrain, but has actually 3 high ground towers set up on it. And one of them I attached some additional stuff to, just kind of shake it up, make sure that the people who are watching videos don't see too much of the exact same thing. And in the case of the players, just always trying to create little unique challenges for them that would just be a little bit different. I also set up this table after knowing the match, so I did know which 2 possible missions it was. And so I tried to make sure, since I knew Never Tell Me the Odds was one of the options, I kind of wanted one of those 2 midline objectives to be elevated. And often I see a lot of setups where neither of those end up being elevated. So he is going to activate the Rebel Commandos. They are starting off with Commando Doctrines. Just resolving the dashes at this point. If you see that little piece of scatter terrain that he landed next to, that's an antenna setup from the core set, and I just attached it to a PVC cap, like for a PVC pipe. So just looks pretty cool on the table. Little easy trick from the hardware store. And so in this particular case, both of the commandos, one just sort of backs up and the other one moves further forward. So here, what they're doing is he's wondering whether or not the Rebel Commando is within 5 of Chirrut. Scott was asking Kenny which stance they started in. He was verifying that he's in the stance that would provide them with cover, not steadfast. Scott discovers that he had a stray force. So Scott is electing to shoot at Kenny's rebel commando. Kenny rolls 6 dice because he starts with a hunker token. Overall, it's 4 blocks. And it looks like Scott is going to have 2 crits that go through. And so it looks like 2 damage pin shove, which is always it's always awesome, like, for you as a player, especially with Rebel Commandos who can do some really aggressive plays. When you can pin models so early on before they even activate, that can be a really big deal. Now, obviously, the list certainly has ways of healing that off, but the more that you can kind of create that additional pressure for your opponent, definitely go for it. So he follows up just a little bit into the terrain. So he starts off controlling a point that would usually be one that would be kind of easy for Kenny. So off to a solid start for Scott, I feel like. Now, you're always feeling a little bit of risk here. Commandos can definitely die. Kenny reveals Cassian Andor. So Kenny's kind of contemplating. I don't know if it's whether or not he should reserve. Scott is commenting here that he kind of wishes that the viewers on YouTube would get to hear their hear what they're saying, and he had made a joke, and it was just Cassian Andor what? And he just really wanted all of you to be able to enjoy that. There was quite the cackle. Yeah. All right. And so Kenny does elect to reserve Cassian and ends up pulling Bazin Chirrut, which is a very solid pull for him at the moment. Cassian would have been fine, but Bazin Chirrut might actually be optimal. It's going to get him the force back for reserving Cassian, and those 2 models just put so much pressure on your opponent. We'll see. So in this moment, I think as a player, you're always kind of trying to figure out, is there a world where you can take 2 points? Like, obviously, it's going to be very easy for them, very reliable for them to take the point from the Rebel Commando. But what I would be asking is, what world could I end up taking 2 points? Is there a world where both of them shoot the Rebel Commandos and maybe he gets Bazin Chirrut to a back point? Can he cross the table to that other objective? The answer is often no, but you should be asking yourself that. And so Kenny's just taking his time figuring out the plan. So here it looks like he is advancing both Bazin Chirrut. He does get into engagement with the Rebel Commando, so they lose hunker. One of them is outside of range 2. So he does elect to flip sides, get a free focus action. Okay. Chirrut is attacking first. I'm not 100% sure if this is the melee or the ranged. We'll see how many dice he's got. He is electing to use coordinated fire, 1 point of auto damage from the Rebel Commandos. Looks like, so this is the melee attack, because he's got 8 dice. Sounds like 3 expertise becomes 2 crits. And Scott has 2 blocks and an expertise, so that's going to be 3 blocks. Right now, Kenny's deliberating if he wants to re-roll. Lots of expertise over there. So it looks like 3 damage, strain, push. I will have to double check the timing. I can't remember if Callus can do rerolls when you use coordinated fire, because I think they have the same trigger. But there's 2 of these attacks coming in, so we'd have the option to do one on do the coordinated fire on one of them either way. So it ends up being 3 blocks from Scott after expertise, 3 expertise for Kenny, just waiting for kind of a final total plan from Kenny. So he's realizing he can get the wound, and he's trying to determine if he wants to go for it, and he believes he should. So it's going to be 4 damage, push once, and pin. All right. Attack is resolved, so now it is time for revenge triggers. So with the case of Cassian's revenge trigger, it can be anyone besides the unit that got wounded. And so when I first read the card, I thought it meant that Cassian couldn't move, and I know other people had that as well. But when it's saying other, it's referring to who triggered the effect, which is the wounded unit. Scott here is asking whether or not they're measuring from the inside or the outside. We had, so far at this event, largely been playing that you measure from the inside. And so they're just carrying on with that. So Cassian is electing to use the revenge trigger on himself to give himself a reposition. And he hits that ladder on the high ground just to give himself a little bit more options later on. And then he's electing to spend the force for a reposition. And he hits a ladder that's kind of obscured by the gantry, but it is there. He's not sure if doesn't look like he's going to get on that point, but it gets him pretty close. So Scott reveals Shatterpoint. So that definitely opens up a lot of options here. He's definitely considering doing the commandos. Now, there's some pluses and minuses to this play. It's a really powerful activation. They're nearly guaranteed a focus action, which means they can roll 10 dice potentially. But having them already with like there just becomes a very reasonable chance that they could leave the table, right? Like both of these lists can deal a lot of damage. And so going for this play is like definitely kind of an all-in on struggle one sort of play, in my opinion. It can definitely backfire if you don't take the struggle, because it can put you in a rough spot later on. But man, as an opponent, this can just be a little backbreaking. He definitely looks like he has the ability to score 4 points here. Okay. So he did use commando doctrines and is rolling 10 dice because of Cassian, because it is a Shatterpointed rebel. All right, looks like 2 blocks, 2 expertise. So it ends up being 3 blocks. It sounds like 8 hits, 2 fails. So just a bunch of hits, blocks 3. So he's going to go 5 down, which I believe is full tree for them. Sounds like 5 damage, multiple heals, and shove twice. Because they were steadfast, he only got to shove them once, so it does end up with still being on a point. The other guy shoots him. Looks like 4 expertise, which becomes crit, hit, hit. Looks like 4 total blocks for Baze and Chirrut after expertise. Looks like 3 steps. So 2 damage, pin, double push. He's realizing he could wound, but he kind of wants points. So, yeah, he's electing to definitely go for the push option as opposed to the wound option because he's going for VPs. And he realizes if he gets the wound, then Cassian is going to be able to definitely stop him from taking a point that he wants. Yeah. Over here, they're just trying to make sure they get the most accurate shove angle, and I am here to assist them. So I'm just trying to make sure that we've got it, kind of positioned directly between them. Okay. So they just wanted to make sure that it was in the most accurate spot, and then they're going to go ahead and resolve the shove. And then looks like 1 follow-up for the Rebel Commando. Now they're resolving the move action for the Rebel Commandos. Here he's just declaring that he wants to stay outside of range 2 of Chirrut to keep the hunker token. And then that one is moving to take the back point from Kenny. So, man, this definitely looks like a score 4 turn for Scott, which is a very powerful opening play. If I were in Kenny's shoes at the moment, I would certainly be sweating at least a little. But he's had a lot of great games with Scott. I know he's not the kind of player to ever give up early, and I don't think I've ever seen him tilt either. Just a very stoic player. So here there's just a little discussion going on between the players about how good Rebel Commandos are. I think that's a sign of like a fun player. Instead of kind of complaining about how much pressure they feel at the moment, they're just like, man, don't you love Rebel Commandos? So good. Trying to put a positive spin on kind of like what they're feeling and the pressure they're feeling in that moment. Yeah. Rebel Commandos, just having the ability, like on 3 steps, to do a pin and 2 shoves is just so impactful. Still a conversation for one of, if not the best unit in the game, or at least for supports. All right, so now there's an interesting decision for Kenny. He has Cassian in reserve, so whatever he flips, he's got to activate. I don't know how many cards in his deck could flip 2 points at the moment. So I think he's going to go ahead and do Cassian. Scott is acknowledging that he's holding up his dash tool at the moment to remember that Boba Fett gets to jump. I think I definitely agree with getting the Cassian play going. It's a very reasonable play to be able to take some points. So looks like he's moving both Ezra and Cassian. So he's doing a melee attack, and he's on the shove side. And so this is going to be 7 dice. He's doing coordinated fire damage. Only 1 block from the rebel commandos. Looks like it's going to be full tree for Cassian. Oh, nope, only 4 steps. But it'll be 4 steps plus a damage. I always love Kenny's deliberation on exactly what he wants to do with his tree. He's definitely a player where I feel like he just comes up with very interesting decisions. So now what he's checking there is he's going, do we think that Cassian from there can revenge trigger to the objective? So he's going to do 8 damage with the Rebel Commando damage. So going for the wound, that's a lot of pressure on those Rebel Commandos. Once you hit the next shuffle, they're going to activate and leave the table. All right, so does look like he shoves the Rebel Commando off and then does a follow-up into the terrain. So boys are contemplating steps. All right, so now it is revenge trigger time. Scott put the tool on top of kind of overlapping the terrain, and it was just kind of a brain fart moment. Maybe played a little MCP and thought the model had flight. All right. So that's a revenge trigger for Boba. I think so. The goal here is that he wants Boba to now be able to use his jump to take that point. And so with Cassian ending his turn, now there's going to be a jump from Boba. Very cool play here from Scott. I like that a lot. Having the kind of a wherewithal to go when you're thinking about the revenge, you're like, I could easily see someone in that moment trying to go for the Cassian and seeing if he gets there. But knowing that the jump plus the full advance for Boba allows him to take that point on the side is a big play for him. All right. It looks like Bazin Chirrut flipped for Scott. Man, that is so many power activations to start a struggle for a player. Like having your Shatterpoint and both of your supports right away just puts so much objective pressure on an opponent. So he's starting off by so he refreshes a force, obviously, and then he's spending a force to go ahead and give both of them a dash. In the background, the Vancouver crew is just about to take off, so they're saying goodbye to everyone. So there's tears being shed. Cannot wait to see all the cool people, Chris and the whole family. It'll be awesome to see them again, hopefully very soon. Here we're just all kind of chatting about how exciting it is, having a family of 4 that all plays Shatterpoint with each other and how cool that is, and how how just generally engaging that is for everyone. So, very, very cool. All right, so over here, that was the full advance from Baze and Chirrut. All right, so it looks like Chirrut is attacking Baze. So Baze is the one who's up on the terrain. So you kind of a white model by the blue crate. So a lot of failures coming through for Scott. So it just ends up being a crit and a hit. All right, so there was only a health left on them. So even though he rolled bad, he got 2 damage, which is enough to wound them. So Scott gets a refresh of force because of Cad Bane. Cad Bane also has a heal, but that doesn't matter at the moment. So now we got some revenge from Kenny. All right, so first thing he does is the Cassian trigger to move Kanan. Yeah. So here, then now Kanan's going to do his revenge trigger and heal a pin and 1 damage off of the Rebel Commandos and is now resolving the jump. This is one of the very cool things about Kanan and Cassian combined is often Kanan is not in the perfect position for the heals, and maybe even the first revenge trigger isn't impactful enough. But in this particular case, being able to give a character a full advance plus a dash is great. So looks like 2 crits, 4 hits from Chirrut. Looks like 2 blocks from, I believe, Cassian here. So it's going to be 4 steps. Four damage, push. I think he's just deliberating the last step. He's kind of evaluating how valuable a pin would be in this moment. And what he's kind of verbalizing is just how significant pin can be to like later on movement, but he elects to go for an expose. Yeah. All right, so here they're just helping each other out. Hat's kind of blocking the view. So what he's trying to figure out here, so that they're trying to figure out is there a shove angle with that piece of terrain? Yeah. So here they were asking me, like, is it possible to do it? And I was just explaining, like, that's not something that I can predetermine. That I can step in and resolve it and be like, hey, it is either going to stop or it's not going to stop. But I can't tell them 100% that it would or would not before they declare the shove. And in this particular case, Kenny was comfortable. He said, at that angle, I believe that you would shove him and clear the terrain. So I'm not stepping in that, regardless of what I would think in the moment, because both of the players have agreed to that particular shove angle being valid. All right, so now we've got a callous activation for Kenny. I believe Scott had just scored 3. So I'm sure in Kenny's position, he is feeling a significant amount of pressure, and he is reserving Calloused, and he gets Shatterpoint, which is probably dream pull for him here, because you get the bonus Cassian dice potentially on who you activate if they can focus, and it gives him the ability to try to make a swing back play here, because he's been kind of playing from behind this entire struggle. So it might be fun if you're watching in this moment, like who would you activate? Are we bringing Baze and Chirrut back? Is it Rebel Commandos? Is it Kanan? There's some interesting plays, but I do think in a Cassian list, there's just a lot of value to Shatterpointing Baze and Chirrut, especially while they're wounded. Because now they have the ability to refresh 2 force, and so their activation is still kind of force neutral. They're going to guarantee focus, potentially be able to roll 9 or 10 dice into stuff. But Rebel Commandos are valid. Definitely, one of the things I like about Kenny's list is how many characters are potentially very valid Shatterpoint options. And I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of list building, where like when you're playing in a tight game and you need to go, well, who's in the position to make the big plays for me? And are they a character who kind of gets, makes the Shatterpoint feel worth it? And I would definitely say, honestly, both of their lists have a lot of really great Shatterpoint plays. Here we just got Kenny checking a bunch of different options. He is definitely a little behind at the moment, and so he knows that in this moment, he's got to make a significant play. And this is, I think for a lot of players, this is the sort of turn that makes or breaks a game. And so he is electing to do Baze and Chirrut. What I was kind of saying there is that I've definitely played in games where in this key moment, you pull the Shatterpoint, it is time to make your comeback play, and they just don't give it quite as enough energy. And I really like Kenny's patience here, just kind of going, all right, what's the right play? Let me not run on muscle memory. Let's really look at the board state and evaluate how am I going to try to come back here. So definitely the time to take a few moments. So it is definitely Baze and Chirrut. If you haven't played much with them yet, they're obviously fantastic, but they always kind of end up being force neutral for the most part because they refresh a force and they get to refresh an additional force if they have an injured token on them. Now, instead of getting that force, you can remove conditions. So if you don't need the force and they had extra conditions on them, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So here, Kenny is double checking who he's activated. And so just reviewing, it's Commandos, Shatterpoint, and Baze and Chirrut are what he's activated so far. So he was just about to flip sides, but he realizes that he needs to think about which of the movement abilities that he wants to use. So he's going to spend the 2 force for the reposition on Chirrut. I believe he feels that Baze is already pretty close to where he wants to be anyway, and here he's happy with just getting a full movement on Chirrut for better positioning. So now they're gonna do the free focus with the stance flip. So I believe this is an attack into Baze from Chirrut. So it looks like 3 blocks and a dash from Baze. So the expertise becomes 2 crits and a pin. Kenny's just calculating steps at the moment. I don't know exactly how far down the tree he's going yet. If you haven't played near Kenny, I love how whenever he's evaluating stuff, he has this moment where he just pauses and he's like, interesting. And I always want to know exactly what he's thinking in the moment. Three damage, shove, pin, expose, all things factored in. And then the pin gets removed because he had a dash on the defensive tree. Here's just trying to be as accurate as possible with the shove angles. Now it looks like Baze is doing an attack into Boba Fett. Boba Fett has the sweet Mandalorian armor, but only 4 defensive dice. So 4 blocks for Boba Fett. Looks like a pretty good roll from Kenny, just 1 fail. Yeah, because so he blocks 4 hits, but then on top of that has another hit, 2 crits, and 2 expertise. So still going to full tree on Boba. Pin, push once, disarm, and 6 damage. So Chirrut goes and hits that ladder on the high ground, and then you can kind of see it in the visual, but there's a full length ladder on that side of that high ground. So that ends up being a pretty big turn for Kenny. Kenny had started moving the so what they're discussing here is they started moving the token, and then there was kind of like a second guess. Wait a second, am I moving this the right amount? So what we're doing here is kind of going back through how much they scored each turn, just to make sure that we don't mess up the score here. And so we remember what it is per turn, because there haven't actually been that many activations. And so here there's kind of double checking, make sure we get the token into the right spot. So it was a 4-point score for Kenny. So big flip there. Kenny has got to feel great about that, and putting pressure on the back line. I think another aspect, we kind of saw it in the semifinals game, that it's really good for later on in the game to making sure that you have activations that can kind of impact any moment on the board, because you just don't know where the next objectives are going to flip. And so you can really easily get in a trap against what Scott did to Kenny, where it was immediately taking objectives on Kenny's side of the board. And even if Kenny's able to like kind of come back, but all of his stuff is kind of stuck in that just like 1/3 section of the board or 1/2 section of the board, whereas Scott has things all over the map, it just puts Scott in a much better position later on. And so here now, Kenny is finally spreading out, which I think is going to help him in later struggles. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough in like how people should be playing Shatterpoint. Make sure that you have ability to impact a variety of points later on in the game. So it looks like a Cassian flip for Scott. I think he's kind of deliberating, is this a reserve moment? I think if I were to totally guess, not knowing what's going on in Scott's brain, obviously he was probably feeling really good up until that Shatterpoint flip and was in a very strong position. And now suddenly he's in the position where he's got to make a big play, because this could really, really significantly, yeah, could definitely kind of swing in, there's just a lot of potential here for the game to kind of drift out of one person's control. And so in this moment, you've got to get a big play going. you really want to at least score 3. Whenever you're having a game this close, this important, and you're scoring 2, you're pretty much never happy with that during struggle 1. So it does look like he's doing Cassian. So right now he's spending a force to move Cassian and another rebel. Looks like what he's contemplating is, can he move and shoot at Cassian? Can Cassian on Cassian violence happen? And so he uses the dash to move, looks like bays forward. All right. It is a big shot into the Kenny's Cassian. So one of the things to track on the Cassian is which side of the which stance is on, because one side is range 5, one side is range 4. So he is definitely on the range 5 side. Not a great block from Kenny. Cassian was exposed, so 0 blocks. So even though it was kind of a very mediocre roll for Scott, he's going to go 4 down. Yeah, so it looks like it's going to wound, pin, and disarm Cassian, which allows him to refresh a force. You know, one of the things here, I love playing Cad Bane, and my concern with this particular like Cassian Cad Bane list is it just doesn't often have the force to give Cad Bane some extra movement. And so I think the best part about Cad Bane's card is his ability to jump off of any attack where he's not within range 4 of the target. And so it looks like Kanan is using the 2 heals to remove the status effects from Cassian. There's still a move action left for Cassian, so I think here he's kind of trying to block landing zones, would be my guess. Because he's kind of directly away from the objective. So I think his goal is to be on the objective and kind of be where Cassian. But it looks like Cassian's planning to go the other direction anyway. But I still really like that play. I think using revenge triggers to kind of land where someone wants to move into is a pretty big deal. So he did get a momentum out of it, but it looks like it's just probably going to be a score 2 turn for Scott. Oh, he ends up losing a point, so he's only going to score 1. That's definitely a rough turn, even with the wound. That was one of the hard parts when you get this kind of Cad Bane wounding focused list, and you really wanted to keep the force flowing, but when it prevents you from being able to score, that gets very difficult. So I don't know if there was. I mean, maybe there's a world there where you just soften up Cassian, but it also could just be that Scott needs the force. And it's also a side effect of just kind of like who is Cassian able to move. I see a lot of discussion just about out of activation movement and how impactful it is. But sometimes a dash on a list like this where you can just dash your supports and nobody else because they're the only two rebels and how often they're wounded. All right, so Kenny has decided to just utilize his Callus activation. So he's just doing a 6 dice coordinated fire damage shot into, I believe, Baze, who is exposed. So it's just going to be one block, but not a big roll either. So it's just going to go 2 steps. I think he's realizing that with the coordinated fire, he might be able to wound. I think a lot of time you instinctively think about the shove side, and in this case, he's like, "Oh, wait a second, maybe I go for the wound because this is a good time because Cassian can't really go anywhere because otherwise he gives the objective to Chirrut." Yeah. So it does allow him to get IG-88 further forward, but definitely a cool play, I think. I think whenever you're playing against Revenge, you want to kind of examine when do you want to get those wounds. And so but yeah, this is just like the game has kind of flipped on its head. Like if you were watching it just for the first few turns and then kind of pause, you'd be like, "Oh man, this is just Scott is devastating." But now it is swung really heavily into Kenny's favor, and he takes the struggle. Yeah, I'm just double checking. Yeah, Callus, if he takes one out, he could either have 2 damage, 2 shoves, or he could have 4 damage. And so with the coordinated fire damage, that just kind of like perfectly helped him hit that break point. So we got the V shape either way. Scott's just kind of elaborating which one does he want to pick for the shape. So here they're just cleaning up some control tokens because they all get removed at the end of the struggle. So you look at it, there's some points being controlled, but like they're not controlled by much. Yeah. So Scott is electing that even though Kenny is starting off in control of 2 of these points, Scott believes he just has better access to take those points. I believe they are using the acrylic tokens that they just got for going this far in the GT. And so they're just kind of excited about cool nerd swag, which who isn't, if you're going to be honest? So he has pulled Boba Fett as his activation. I am sneaking around taking a picture of the game. And so here he's just kind of elaborating what does he want to do with Boba Fett? Priority point is the block, which is the one kind of in front of Kenny. And so that's definitely an awkward spot, but I'm really excited to see what Scott does with this Boba activation. Okay. So Boba jumped towards an enemy primary to remove the pin. So he heals the disarm, but he's going to roll a 10 dice attack, spending a force with the Boba Fett or with IG-88's ability. So 10 dice attack into Baze. Good block from Baze. 3 blocks, 3 expertise. And then there's a block to fail. So 4 blocks, crit to hit for Baze. So it's going to be 3 steps for Boba. He's realizing here that he's going to be just shy of getting the key numbers that he wants. Yeah. He's just double checking. They verified they were looking at the right amount, and it is indeed 3 steps down. Man, Baze and Chirrut have some really good defensive expertise. Scott is double checking that they are not on the steadfast side. So here they're looking at the shove angle, which gets a little bit awkward when you've got the high ground and stuff in the way. Like, can you get the most precise kind of placement? But that's why I'm there. Judge is there to do this stuff for you. It's always kind of funny looking at it from the camera. But I agreed that Scott was going to be able to shove him off. So it ends up dealing 5 damage. I can't see all of Scott's force, but I'm assuming he must just not have any force left, because otherwise he would spend 1 for knee rockets. Oh, what it is he had the force for Cad to do the last 2, but he needed to go 1 more down to put him in that range. Or maybe he just doesn't have the force for Cad. So I believe that was just 1 point for Scott. Now it is Kanan time. The coolest mentor in all of Star Wars. I'm about to make enemies there, aren't I? Yes, I think he's a better mentor than Obi-Wan or Yoda. So it does look like Kenny has 2 force remaining. He's using the clone trooper enamel pins over there. So, but he's electing to reserve. That's interesting. I definitely would have considered going and force pushing Cassian off. So he gets Ezra. Ezra is going to move action to the ladder. Make sure he's up there. Now he's just deciding who to attack. He's going to go ahead and shoot the blaster at Mr. Fett, the legendary bounty hunter. Looks like just 1 block for Boba. Gonna go 4 steps down with Ezra. Only 3 health left on Boba Fett, so it looks like it's gonna be a wound. So he does 4 damage, and he hits the heal 3 step to remove 3 off of Baze and Chirrut, and then kind of jumps. Not sure if it was a jump or a reposition, but he's just moving a little further backwards. So he did get a wound with a secondary unit, and but he is not electing to spend the force to gain more momentum. Scott is kind of feeling like he's surprised Kenny didn't spend for it. 3-point score for Kenny. All right, so it ends up being the fail symbol, which is where Ezra's at. It's IG-88. And I think Scott definitely wanted the other card here. One of the things that I think can really be frustrating on Never Tell Me the Odds is when the priority objective plus the order deck card is just giving you the opposite combination that you want. You're like, well, I want to activate this guy and go after this objective, but then the priority die just is like, nope, that you don't get to do the optimal play. Looks like rolling dice into Ezra. Yes, definitely Ezra. 2 blocks and a dash. Expertise for Scott becomes crit and a hit. Looks like he's going 5 steps down. 8 damage, push twice on Ezra. And there's still an action left on IG-88. Scott is gaining his momentum, refreshing the 2 force because it was a bounty hunter wound. He's spending a force to challenge the odds. Now it's revenge trigger time. Here, Kenny's just going to go, where is my Baze and Chirrut at the moment? So it looks like the full advance. Oh no, so that was Kanan. All right, so here what they're wanting to know is where can Kanan jump up? Okay. We agreed that the full advance tool was still in the same spot, so Kanan should be connected to that. And so here, what Kenny is saying is he's like, I want whatever angle gets me up onto the thing. This would be public information. So this is just me as a judge kind of going, does he get up there? And so, yeah. And so I was misunderstanding the initial question where it was like, can you get up at that angle? Because I was thinking he was trying to go for the point. But what he's actually trying to do is just is there an angle where that tool overlaps with the gantry? which would, again, be public information for the players. And so I'm checking there to see if there's a sliver of the tool that ends up being under the gantry. I'm just trying to be as precise as possible. I know this is an important game for both of these gentlemen, and I just want to do my best to, yeah. So I'm going to at that angle, there is basically a millimeter going under the gantry, and so Kanan can go up there. It's not close enough to be on the point, but he is up there. It was a wound on Ezra, so Kanan gets an attack here. Clearing some tools out of the way. So here, the thing is that he wants to get to the objective. Kanan can attack whoever he wants, though. It does not have to be at IG-88. So this is where maybe one shove gets him onto the point and makes this very complicated for Scott to be able to get that point. So this is probably one of the things that frustrates people the most about Kanan is because of that attack and his ability to get into solid positions. So just a 5 dice attack. Very solid roll. 2 hits, crit, and 2 expertise, it looks like. 3 blocks, crit to fail, jump, and a heal. So he only is going to go 1 down and just deal 2 damage. Yeah. That defensive roll kind of saved Scott for a little bit. Like, could have been so catastrophic if Kanan went 2 down, and that was a good attack roll. So there he was just resolving the jump for Cad Bane. Here, Scott was asking what is left in Kenny's deck, and he's just going, it's Kanan and the Rebel Commandos. These boys always call them Rangers, and so I'm trying to always reverse in my head and make sure I'm saying Commandos and don't just start saying Rangers and really confuse everyone who's watching the game. We're like, Rangers? So, all right, there's still a move action left for IG. And so here IG-8 is just doing kind of a full advance towards the middle. It is a 3-point score for Scott. So good roll there for Kenny. It's the one that he's already controlling, which gives him nice flexibility about where he wants to go. He's a little concerned here that if he doesn't go with Kanan, that the Commandos don't have anywhere to kind of actually affect the score. He's only got 1 force left. Kanan definitely doesn't need a force, but he's not getting a force push unless he switches to Suresu, which seems unlikely. So he is in a very reasonable force spot. My gut here is that he goes with Kanan, but we'll see if Scott is feeling something different. Oh, he's eyeing the potential switch to Suresu. Maybe I stand totally corrected that Scott is ready to go lightsaber when the time is right. I think it can definitely be a kind of a common feeling that that switching to Suresu can certainly backfire in the long run. They're joking around with each other because Kanan's lightsaber is broke, that he can't switch to Suresu's side because his lightsaber is off. Love these guys. It's always, I love doing commentary over games where you have two people who have just such camaraderie and rapport that they can joke around with each other during a finals. Love that. So it is going to be Kanan. He has committed, it seems like. He is electing to dash himself. Or so it looks like he's going to do a dash on Callus and a dash on himself. So now it's going to be a focus action and an attack into Cad Bane. Cad Bane has 1 damage on him, so it would be 8 to wound. So what they were fixing at the moment is that he was saying that he was switching sides for the attack and rolled the appropriate amount of dice for that. If he was still on Pack Hunter, it would have been the wrong amount of dice. So now a lot of Kanan players don't spend very much time on Suresu, so he's kind of got the card in his hand, kind of going, all right, what am I doing here? So it sounds like 1 push. So right here, Kenny isn't making decisions about where else he goes down the tree, because you do actually resolve them in order. So he's starting off with the shove. So here they're just trying to make sure they shove him the right distance. And so Kenny has just asked Scott, can you verify from your angle that I'm not shoving him too far? So, all right, so he has gotten Cad Bane off the objective, or at least off the elevation. So it's 6 damage, so he's at 7 now. He also pins and exposes and gets a free force push. So what's going on? What's going on here is he's trying to get the right angle because Kenny wants to push him into Chirrut if he can. Boba Fett is resolving his jump, but it doesn't impact scoring. So rolls a fail, which means that it's the spot that Kanan just took, and it is now Cad Bane's activation. He is the last guy. Definitely a tough spot. He's starting off pinned. I think the Boba Fett jump is interesting. That play makes me lightly nervous. It could work both ways, right? Because sometimes you want to occupy the elevated space so your opponent cannot, but there's also a world there where that spot may take the spot that Cad Bane would have preferred to move into. And since Boba doesn't immediately affect scoring, that might not be a perfect position for him, but just not sure what exactly was the thought process there. It has also been a long weekend for these boys, so sometimes you just make decisions and roll on instinct a little bit. That doesn't always work out in your favor, but Scott's also just a really, really good player, so there could be something there I'm just totally not seeing. Hard. Whenever you have your last card who is already pinned and you have to activate them, you didn't really get any window to get a heal on them. So what's the plan here? I definitely understand Scott taking some time here, just kind of thinking through the options. So he's starting off, he's going to declare an attack. All right, so he's spending his last force to, why don't you step aside? He's doing his Clint Eastwood impression. Yeah. He has elected to keep Kanan there, and he is exposed and strained. This could be a very, very critical attack. 3 blocks. The expertise doesn't matter. There is the potential for rerolls, though. And this is one of the really powerful things that Callus presents. Like, when you're in an advantage state, there is definitely the ability for you to just spend your last force to deny a score. Kenny elects to not do any rerolls here. Looks like Cad is going to go down 3 steps. Kenny is declaring that he is going to resolve the deflect to try to wound. Cad Bane is going to get a heal, though, before that. So, shove with Cad. Kanan does elect to take the strain damage to deal 2 damage to Cad Bane. So now Cad Bane is at 8 out of 9 damage. So it looks like just some little bit more deliberation for Scott. He removes the pin. Prio roll for Kenny. Scott is just now realizing how much he is sad that they didn't do when the town, this town is ready to blow. And Kenny was saying he intentionally didn't do it. He didn't want to utilize it. Scott is realizing that he's left characters on 1 multiple times now, and if he had gotten even 1 damage through on this town is ready to blow, that could be an absolutely game changer for this second struggle for him, because he's just been 1 damage shy on 2 different characters. They're just kind of talking in retrospect of like who all would have taken damage. I think if you've never played in a finals before, you may not realize that there just isn't such thing as a perfect game. Maybe you could play a perfect game in the first round of an event, but then you have more nerves. You maybe shaking some rust off, all sorts of things. The reality is I'm not sure any game of Shatterpoint is ever played absolutely perfectly. And so you just, if you haven't done a big tournament or like you're planning for your first GT, you just got to realize that like you just wear down as the day goes on and the weekend goes on, where you are just not at 100%. So that's why when we talk tournament prep and such, it's how can you get yourself into the best possible mental state? And that's why we emphasize drinking water and making sure you have snacks and sit down when you can. Anything that you can do to refresh yourself. So the last activation for Kenny is Rebel Commandos. I'm realizing that where I position terrain and stuff does make it a little awkward for seeing the struggle trackers. So it's definitely something I'm going to think about in the future. So let's see. So Rebel Commandos resolving commando doctrines. It's crazy that this is the first shuffle still. Feels like there's been so many incredible plays, and they're still at the first time through the deck. Now they're resolving the full movements. Here he's just going, I want to be outside range 2 of CAD. Now I think it's time to take some shots. I love the very clear declaration of which one is attacking who. So the commando who's kind of in the middle is taking a shot at Cassian. I think there's a world here because I believe commandos have a reposition, but I don't think that's going to be far enough down. But I like the play. So it was 4 blocks or 5 blocks reposition, or just 5 blocks for Cassian, and just like nothing gets through from the commando. Okay, now the other one's shooting Cad Bane. Only 2 blocks for Cad Bane. It's going to be 2 steps for the Rebel Commandos. Ends up being 2 damage push pin. Dropping the hunger from the Rebel Commandos, gained a momentum, and now there is a Cassian trigger. Scott's definitely feeling like he doesn't have a great Cassian trigger here. He's got a lot of wounded characters. Here, Scott was declaring that he's removing the pin from Cad Bane. I don't think it ends up mattering, but that is not what you can do. You can't do the reposition on the character who got wounded. But I don't think it's going to end up being relevant. It would only matter if Cad Bane went to activate again and had another condition. So sometimes there are very, very innocent mistakes that just don't really have a real impact on the game. But there is a great number of times I wish I could do that reposition on somebody who was the one who got wounded. So it's going to be the fail, which is that kind of upper right corner of the table. Cad Bane is the first flip. The removing the pin doesn't matter here because Cad Bane would have been able to remove that pin anyway. So he is electing to activate with Cad Bane. So I'm trying to remember who all exactly is up on that. So Kanan's up there, but Kanan only has 2 health left. No, is it 3? Oh, it's 2 health. And so it's definitely not going to be a stretch for Cad Bane to get a kill there. Boba Fett is up there. And then I believe it's also another wounded character. I think it's Ezra is up there wounded. So he only has to go 1 step to get Kanan. There is also a thing here to remember that, like, Cad Bane would get to refresh 2 force. So there's a world where, like, do you want to jump first? And here he does. He's spending 2 force to jump. Little rocket boots action, pulling his Star-Lord impression. Yeah. So what they were just asking there, Kenny couldn't remember where Cad Bane was because he had originally force pushed him into that other model, but when Cad Bane got the shove on his tree, he shoved himself forward into the terrain. So it looks like attack roll into Kanan. Ready for the dice, boys. Give it to me. We're getting down to the numbers. All right, a single block for Kanan with his grand 2 health. So I think that's a full tree for Cad Bane. They're kind of acknowledging that it may be too late for that sort of swing roll to really matter. So here's just calculating the steps. The hard part here is Kanan does get a revenge trigger even when he himself gets wounded. So that could still be tough for Cad Bane. Eight damage, heal, pin, push, jump. So here what they're kind of discussing is they're wondering if it was going to be a valid spot for him to land there, and they were just kind of discussing who else was where, and so it gets kind of hard. Basically, in what Scott's saying in this moment is, hey, I believe you shoved my character into that spot, and they don't believe that other character had moved there, but so they're kind of having a discussion, but I don't think it's a super impactful thing in this moment because the Rebel commandos were not there when the other character got pushed off of that high ground. So I believe here is where they're going to call me over and they'll just be like, hey, in this current board state, can Kanan be shoved off that point? Yeah. I'm explaining in the moment, like, I don't know exactly where that Rebel Commando was when the prior character was shoved off. So I'm going to resolve things based on the current board state. And so looking at it, and it looks like Kanan is going to be able to be shoved off. And so, what I'm trying to do here is figure out the valid spot. And before we touch, I'm asking them, like, are you guys going for the shove regardless? Like, this is just, you're going for this play so I can go ahead and resolve it. And so what I wanted to do here is that I'm just going to do a quick proxy. Yeah. So here I'm putting him down and making sure that the base is going to clear that high ground ledge. And what I declared there is that he is not going to be able to fit because I put him base to base with the Rebel Commando and the back of the base was still under the high ground. Not a super big deal. I think Scott was just, it's been a long day, so he was thinking about when the Rebel Commando got there versus when the other character got shoved off, which I believe was Cad Bane. And I think the Rebel Commandos happened after Cad Bane was shoved off. So here we're just double checking that Kanan is still, kind of fully on that gantry. He is in Suresu, so it looks like he's going to take a lightsaber attack into Cad Bane. Now Kenny's like, wait a second, do I make the attack? Because so he's going to not make the attack, and he's just doing the Cassian trigger on the Rebel Commando to then use that ladder now that Kanan has moved out of the way to clear the spot. Yeah. This is the power of the Cassian. They're calling it here. He's going to score 1. I did ask the boys just for my own personal clarity. I think off screen we ended up rolling, and he rolled a priority roll, which meant that he didn't have to move anybody. So that was going to be game off of that Cassian trigger. But overall, very interesting matchup. I think the boys definitely discussed it in advance, and Kenny did feel advantaged compared to the to that Cassian Cad Bane list, which is a little bit more wounding focus and maybe teched for some of the other things in the meta. But in this, man, Scott came out so hard and put so much pressure on Kenny. It definitely looked like it was favoring Scott there for at least the first few activations, but that key Shatterpoint flip for Kenny, he was just able to swing things back in his favor. And so I hope this is a lesson for anyone who's watching, no matter how important the game and no how bad the first 3, card flips are for you, you can still come back. Now, mind you, a lot of things definitely did have to go Kenny's way, but he just stayed in the game, kept his head in the game, was trying to make the best plays possible. And I really liked how many moments that he was pausing, kind of being calm, reviewing the moment, like, do I do rerolls here? Like, is this important for me to get this character to this point? And definitely brought some of that chess play, that you're talking about, like thinking multiple steps ahead, don't get caught up too much in the moment, and just making really strong plays there. And this is also an example. Never Tell Me the Odds puts a lot of pressure on your order deck, and when characters come up in relation to different priority points, it's a very, very spread out. So you have got to be able to move. I definitely liked seeing some of the cool plays with Cad Bane and stuff at the end, but it just seemed like things had swung a little too far into Kenny's favor. If I were to pick any moment to kind of go back, I know that Scott had kind of elected to specifically choose the objective setup that he knew Kenny was starting off a little bit stronger on, but thought that he had better access to those plays. And I don't know if that would have shifted things dramatically the other way, because I think I do fundamentally agree with Scott's choice there. He got slightly unlucky with the Boba Fett attack roll, which kind of put him further on the back foot. But if he had chose the other setup, his characters were just kind of out of position, but that's probably the of the decisions, because it seemed like a lot of the things that were kind of hurting Scott were just kind of how the priority rolls were going, how the order deck was going, how dice rolls were going, started to just like chip away at his position. And I don't know if that would have made a difference, but that would probably be a thing that if you're like, hey, trying to like take an examination approach, I'd be curious how it would have played out, knowing what we know now about the order deck and such. Would he have been able to maybe like hold on more? But yeah, my gut is that Scott made the right call, that choosing that V shape gave him better access. And yeah, obviously not remembering when this town is ready to blow. I noticed that like Nick at this event had like a marker for himself. He had like a little printout like, hey, buddy, don't forget this, which is something from War Machine back in the day. We would do things like write our, once per game ability, like on our hand, or like hold the token that we use to represent that, because of how easy it is to forget about that sort of thing, especially when it breaks the normal cycle of things. And so if you are going to play Cassian, I would definitely say, have a way to like help yourself with the memory there. I definitely feel for Scott for getting that, and then like leaving multiple characters on 1 health was rough. And like maybe if he had done that, then boom, maybe he comes back, but also could have rolled no damage and it may not have mattered. And so yeah, it's just a tough spot. But these guys played great. They went through a lot of games. Scott did not lose a game until this one. And both he and Kenny were playing through some of the best players in the community and best players at the GT. I don't think they had like an easy game the whole time. And so I think this really stands out to me, just like how strong both of these guys are as players. Scott won LVO by just like barely. They were at a point where one of them was going to win basically the next activation, and Scott came out on top of this one, or on top of that one. Now Kenny comes out on top of this one. Like, they're just both amazing players, and I think they have games like this on the regular. So props to these guys. They clearly, steel sharpens steel. Two magnificent players, and they are always welcome back. I am going to try to help my boys as much as possible, and I'm going to try not to let them win next year if they come back to the GT. But congratulations to Kenny. Marvelous person. Absolutely plays great. Great list building. Great podcast. Definitely check out Zion's Finest and make it out to their events if you have a chance, because he really is the trifecta of wonderful person, wonderful player, and wonderful TO. So huge props to these guys. And we'll just close out things here and be like, are we living in the Zi-Fi meta? Because I believe that we probably are. Later, nerds.